Hi, I'm DV, and this time I'm going to talk about garter snakes, more specifically feeding garter snakes. So I'm going to talk about, things you should feed them, things you should never feed them, variety in the diet, supplementation, and go over a couple of tips to get picky eaters to take food for you. So I'm going to start out by talking about the things you should never feed your snake. The most common one I hear is crickets. Garter snakes can eat crickets. They can't. Do not feed your garter snake any sort of insect, cricket, mealworm, dubia roaches, nothing like that. They will probably just ignore it, but if they do get hungry enough and try to eat it, that can cause problems because their systems aren't meant to digest chitin, which is what their exoskeletons are made out of, and that can cause problems like intestinal blockages, and it also doesn't digest well. They're not getting any nutrients really out of it. So if you've heard from somebody that you should feed your garter snake crickets, I don't know, find a new friend, because that person is giving you terrible information. So another common thing I hear is that garters are a great snake if you don't want to feed rodents. That has a grain of truth in it, but to be honest, a rodent-based diet is really what's recommended for garters. Now, absolutely, you can supplement it with other non-rodent food items, but as far as a source of complete nutrients, including calcium, rodent-based diet is hard to beat. So I know some people do fish-based diets or worm-based diets, but if you're only feeding fish or worms, you're eventually going to run into problems. You really should have rodents in there somewhere. So I guess what I'm going to cover next is the things that you really should be feeding. So the most common feeder item for garter snakes is pinky mice. So you can see this little guy right here. These mice are about a day old. They have no fur yet, and that's really important because unlike other snakes that are meant to eat large adult rodents out in the wild, garters don't have the capability to digest hair well. And this can cause impaction, which is intestinal blockage, and I've known people personally who have lost snakes to intestinal blockage from feeding prey with hair on it. It doesn't happen all the time, but it is a risk, and it's just so much easier to just feed more smaller prey like the pinky mice than feed something larger with hair and run the risk of your snake dying from it. So avoid anything with hair. As for the number of pinky mice you need to feed at a time, that really depends on the particular snake and the size of the snake. Typically, you want to feed enough that you can kind of tell that the snake has been eating, but don't let them completely gorge themselves. It's really just something you have to play by ear. My adult males will probably eat 3 to 4 pinkies per feeding, and I supplement during the week with night crawlers and other treats sometimes as well. An adult female, which gets significantly larger than an adult male, you could be looking anywhere from 5 to 10, depending on the size of the snake. And some of them have really slow metabolisms and don't need that much. You have to know your snake and watch their weight and make sure that everything is staying where it needs to be as far as determining the amount of food. So another common feeder, one of my personal favorites, is night crawlers. So you can buy these. I use the DMF brand from Walmart. Looks like this. Canadian night crawlers. Open them up before you get them, by the way, because they have a tendency to try and sell containers of worms that have turned into mush, and you don't want to waste your money on that. But they're an excellent source of vitamins and minerals. The snakes generally love them. One thing to watch out for is they're always in a refrigerator with red wigglers. Now, red wigglers, you do not want to feed. They emit a toxic substance that not only smells just revolting, but it can be toxic to garters and cause serious problems. So make sure you're getting the night crawlers. On the subject of worms, A lot of people will feed earthworms, which are your typical, small backyard worms, especially to younger snakes. If you do that, I really hesitate to recommend feeding anything you find outside, simply because, you might not use pesticides or chemicals, but someone, 2 blocks down might, and it can wash in the rainwater. You really have no way to conclusively monitor what's in your food if you're getting it from outside. So if you really want to feed your typical backyard variety earthworms, what I'd recommend is getting a population of them and creating your own vermiculture tank and raising them yourself. That way you know what's in them, you know what they've been fed, and you've been feeding them, so they're probably more nutritious than they would be if you just caught them out in your backyard. So I'll actually probably do a video in the future on how to set up a worm tank. So that's about it for worms. Another common one is silver sides. Now you can find these at pretty much any pet store. This is only half of one. And they're basically just a small silver looking fish. The brand I get is Sally San Francisco Bay Silver Sides. I do not recommend feeding fish as a staple for no matter what type of fish it is. I just do not recommend it. There are so many potential issues that come from feeding a solely fish-based diet that, in my opinion, it's not worth it. Now, a fish every now and then, or a fish to get a picky eater started, or using fish for scenting, that's no problem. But I would not feed a primarily fish diet to a garter snake. Some other issues concerning fish: if you get live feeder fish, first of all, that's a really high parasite risk. They keep the feeder fish in really terrible conditions. They're usually not well taken care of, and they're just a haven for parasites that can be passed on to your snake. Also, things to avoid are goldfish or rosy red minnows. Basically anything with yellow color in it. That's kind of an indicator that the fish has high contents of thiaminase, which causes a severe vitamin deficiency if the snake gets enough of it. And that can lead to neurological problems and death. So you really want to avoid that. Some safe fish species that people use are tilapia is a common one, the silver sides, like I mentioned. I might put up a video with a more extensive list of safe and unsafe fish later, but I don't know it off the top of my head just because I do not feed a lot of fish. If you get fish from the grocery store, one thing to really watch out for is, of course you have concerns revolving around heavy metals like mercury, especially in wild-caught fish. But there's also a preservative that's commonly used in human fish products that it's harmless to us, but it can be immediately fatal to garters. And in my opinion, it's not worth the risk. I personally won't do it. But fish are, in my opinion, the best use of fish is for scenting, to get picky eaters eating again. So that's my opinion on fish. Another thing that a lot of people use, and this is primarily for young ones that haven't really started eating yet, and maybe they need a little extra help getting started eating, guppies. You can see these guys floating around in here. This is just a couple volunteers from my guppy tank. I don't purposefully breed guppies just for feeding to my garters. I had some left over after I was working with a litter of babies that were non-eaters, and I couldn't bring myself to flush them, so now I have a ton of guppies. They're more pets at this point than anything, but if need be, I can feed them to a garter snake that isn't taking pre-killed food. Guppies are a safe fish, but as far as adult garters go, they're too small. They're not going to be interested in them. That's really mainly for really young ones. So that's worms, pinkies, guppies, fish. I guess that's the basic do's and don'ts of what to feed. As far as supplementation goes, if you're feeding primarily worms, which can be done, you can do that, but you have to stay on top of supplementation if you do worms, because worms don't have bones, so they don't have a good calcium source. You will need to supplement if you're feeding almost exclusively worms. However, if you're feeding prey that has bones in it, such as pinky mice, you don't need to worry about supplementation. Don't do it. It's not worth your time, and it's not worth your money, and they don't need it. So with that, I guess I'm going to give you a little feeding demonstration. Not sure how cooperative my snakes are going to want to be. Kind of got them out of their enclosures here for the purposes of this demonstration. So, this guy here, calm down, buddy, I know, is actually my oldest snake. His name is Houdini. He is a Florida Blue Eastern Garter. And he is 16 years old. So, you can see he's got some really great coloration. And fun fact about him is he is pretty much completely blind. By the way, average lifespan for these guys is about 8 years, so, you know, he is ancient by garter standards at this point. So, you'll notice also he's continually tongue flicking, even in excess of what you would normally expect a garter snake to do, and that is because he doesn't really see anything that's around him. He's trying to use his sense of smell to figure out where he's at. So, one problem with him is that he's very picky because he can't see his food. And I want to get as much fat and protein into him as I can. So what I do is, let me get his little box back up here so he can hang out in here while I'm doing this. Alright, go back in your box, buddy. Is scenting. So for scenting, what I do is I have the pinky mouse here, and I have part of my silver side here. Yeah, where are you going, buddy? And basically, I just rub the silver side on the pinky mouse. And it's kind of gross, but now this pinky mouse smells like fish. No, we're not done yet. Get back in here for a second. And let's see if he's interested. Hey, buddy, you smell this? You smell this? You interested in that? Come on. Yeah, you know what that smell is? Oh, yeah, he took it. There you go. So, normally, if I hadn't scented that, I'd be playing around with a pinky mouse for a good 10 minutes trying to get him to take it. And you saw that even out of his enclosure, he took that. Here, buddy, get up here so everyone can see you. Yeah, there he goes. So you can see that took about 30 seconds. And that's an excellent example of something to do if you have a snake that doesn't really feel like eating a particular food item, or you're trying to switch them over from one food item to another. Alright, you did good, buddy. Alright, no, I don't have any more for you. This isn't feeding day. This is all just snacks at the moment. Alright, go back in there for a few minutes. Put you back in your house in a minute. So, here I've got, nope, not you. Here I've got another male Eastern Garter snake. This guy's an albino. He's probably 3 or 4 years old. So as you can see, he's also a lot smaller than Houdini was. Houdini is abnormally large for a male. This is a more typical size for a male. Don't try and bite me because I smell like food. Don't you do it. Alright, they are very smell motivated if you hadn't guessed. So, this guy is a big worm eater. They have food preferences. Some of them like worms, some of them like fish, some of them like mice. Alright, you want a worm, buddy? You interested? Oh, yeah, you are. Yeah, you got that worm. Okay, well, you can't run away with it. I've got you here. So, as you can see, they like worms. And this is one of the things they'll commonly try to do. They'll try to run away with their food. Alright. Come on, buddy. I'll put you back in your little box so you can eat your worm in peace. No, you can't keep running away with it, buddy. Get back in there. Alright. Go on. But that is one thing about them. They'll have food preferences, and that just varies by the individual snake. Just what they like and what they don't like. I have one that she absolutely hates worms. While I'm out here, I'll show you this guy. He's my third Eastern Garter male. You can see he's got a lot of red on him for an albino. Very pretty. Now, calm down. He's a little jumpy when you have him out of his cage, so I'm not going to try feeding him right now. Just wanted to show him off because he's super cute. Alright. Yeah, you're calming down now. Alright. No, you gotta go back in there. You go back to your house in a minute, buddy. And I normally would not recommend getting them out and holding them while you try to feed them. I'm only doing that with the snakes that I know really well, and I know they're not gonna, lose their minds when I do it. So, those are my Eastern Garters. I figure while I'm doing this, I may as well show you my black necks. I have two black necks. They're brother and sister. This first one is the female. Now, these guys have a reputation for being picky eaters. As you can tell by looking at this girl, she's not one of them. She's about a year old, and she's already larger than some of my adult males. So, one thing about blacknecks, they're known for fasting. So if you have one of this particular species, I'd really recommend keeping their temperature and humidity really constant. My reptile room is set up so that I can have tropical species in here, so my ambient temperature stays pretty constant. I've known people that have a setup where the ambient temperature fluctuates a little more, and I've noticed that they seem to have more problems with fasting than I do with these guys. So that may be a good tip if you're dealing with a fasting blackneck. So she's the female from the litter. I'm going to put her back in here. Or not. She don't want to go back in there. Alright, come on. As you can tell, they don't especially like being taken out of their homes. And the last one, and I'm almost hesitant to get this guy out because he actually has neurological damage. To some degree, he was almost a failure to thrive, which means they never stop eating. And he doesn't act quite right. He really doesn't like being handled, but I do want to show you the size difference between males and females. This is the brother of that snake I just had out. Alright, you gonna sink your teeth into me again? You gonna musk me? I know you're thinking about it. Alright, here he is. So you can see how tiny he is compared to how big she was. And I'm going to put him right back because he is trying to musk me, and he got a good bite in on me earlier when I was getting him ready for the video. He's just not a very friendly snake, so to keep from stressing him too much, I try not to handle him a lot. I just wanted to show him off and show you guys the size difference between males and females. So that's about it for garter snake care and feeding. And this will probably be a series. I'll do some more on these snakes a little later. Alright, so like the video, comment in the comment section below if you have any topics you'd like to see me discuss, and I'll see you again next time.